including its main findings and recommendations, followed by reflections from a Filipino human rights lawyer. The second session, which will follow directly afterwards, will shift focus from legal analysis to personal experience. In that session, we will hear voices from affected individuals, including the spouse of a targeted lawyer. And we will watch a short preview of a forthcoming documentary, followed by a Q&A session. It is my honor now to introduce our first speakers, Eleanor Escala, program lawyer, at the International Bar Association Human Rights Institute, and Gonzalo Sáenz Gilles, human rights lawyer and delegate of the International Observatory of Lawyers at Risk, both part of the fact-finding mission delegation, who will walk us through the principal findings. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalia. Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe before diving into the key findings, I'll just say a couple of words on the methodology behind our research. So the report that we are presenting today is the culmination of months of desk research and 10 days of intensive field work across the Philippines. We were 12 delegates and we split into teams. One team that Gonzalo is representing today traveled to the northern region of the country, the Cordillera region, to gather testimonies from all over the region. And another team that Herman and myself were part of traveled to the southern part of the, and Hans as well, yes, traveled to the southern part of the country to gather testimonies from the Visayas and Mindanao region. During these 10 days, we met with approximately 100 individuals, spanning from victims, victims' relatives, victims' lawyers, journalists, national and local civil society organizations, but also academic and forensic institutions. We met with bar associations, with judges and justices from the Supreme Court. We met with the Commission of Human Rights and other institutions and individuals that would be possible to enlist all today. And the findings that we are presenting today are grounded on evidence that is consistent, credible, and deeply alarming. So let me turn to the first finding, is that lawyers, legal professionals in the Philippines, more broadly, have faced and continue to face extraordinary risks just for upholding the rule of law. So really there's a professional hazard to being a public interest lawyer or an independent judge or prosecutor in the Philippines. And of course, this has to be set against the backdrop of Duterte's deadly war on drugs that took the lives of innocent civilians, thousands of innocent civilians. But not only them, also all of those who were seeking to hold the government accountable for the crimes it was committing became a target themselves. And this includes journalists, human rights defenders, and legal professionals too. In the years of Duterte's presidency, from July 2016 to 2022, 59 killings of lawyers were documented, 59 of which 0 proceeded to trial. So really our documentation on some of these cases confirms that the attacks against legal professionals are not isolated incidents. They are part of a systematic plan, a coordinated strategy to silence dissent. And the pattern emerges very clearly just by looking, for instance, at the profiles of those legal professionals targeted. They are disturbingly similar. All of them are like lawyers that work in public interest law. Most of them are unionized. Their clients, they are indigenous communities, workers, fishermen, religious minorities, all the marginalized communities of the country that you can think of. And even the methods to silence them are also, we could identify a clear pattern, a clear thread in the types of human rights violations that they were enduring. It's really a pattern of escalating human rights violations against them. The first method is always surveillance and intimidation. They are followed on the way to court, to their homes, to their offices. They are threatened, sometimes more explicitly, sometimes in more subtle ways, other times maybe through an acquaintance in the police forces. They're invited to their office and they are offered a way to clean up their reputation by dropping their cases. The message is clear, is to stop pursuing the cases that they are working on. If they don't accept this kind of invitation, then most of the times the second pattern of human rights violation follows, red tagging. In the country, this is defined as labeling individuals as communists, terrorists, essentially enemies of the state. It's a smear campaign. It's meant to tarnish their reputation and to isolate them. But more than that, it also sends a message. It's a warning sign. It's a warning sign that more violations will occur, the attacks will continue, and they will likely escalate. And this has been, by the way, recognized also by the Supreme Court of the Philippines last year in the Nuro versus Binoya judgment, served in May 2024. The third pattern of human rights violations then is lawfare, is weaponization of the law to punish and paralyze dissent, essentially all those that are perceived as opponents. It comes in the form of authorities issuing arrest warrants that are arbitrary and often serve as a pretext to plant evidence, or filing trumped up charges, frequently under the twin anti-terror laws, the Anti-Terror Act and the Terrorism Financing Prevention and Suppression Act. Essentially, law is weaponized to go after those that are perceived as dissent. And this doesn't include only individuals, but also civil society organizations. So lawfare has been used as a technique also to stop the work of these organizations by opening trumped-up cases against them, freezing their bank accounts, and preventing them from continuing to do their work. And then finally, it all escalates in physical attacks that most of the times result in extrajudicial killings. We're talking about targeted assassinations, premeditated, well organized, and almost all of them follow the same modus operandi. Most of the times, we're talking about riding in tandem attacks, where two individuals on a motorcycle attack down the streets, the victim. The passenger has a gun and shoots, and the driver of the motorcycle helps to flee quickly the scene of the crime. They ride with unregistered license plate from Fraser Met. They shoot in broad daylight with many bystanders and CCTV cameras, and nonetheless, they are never identified. So really, the recurrence and the consistency of these tactics points to a coordinated scheme, which actually serves a dual purpose. On one side, silencing any voice of dissent, silencing these lawyers that are most of the times also successful in prosecuting cases and defending victims against abuses from the government or from other entities. But on the other hand, it also serves another purpose, that is to instill fear in the legal profession, to foster a chilling effect. And this brings me to the second finding. A key pillar of democracy, independence of the judiciary and of the legal profession, has been put under serious threat in the Philippines, weakening the whole justice system. The Philippine state is under the obligation to ensure that judges, prosecutors, and lawyers can carry out their professional duties without fear of intimidation, harassment, and violence. And this obligation stems not only from the international treaties to which the Philippines is party to, but also from the constitutional asset of the country and the principle of separation of powers. Our legal analysis points to a grave breach of such obligation, and since the state has systematically failed to protect legal professionals from the human rights violations that we have just described, and it's not only failure to protect. In many cases, through both action and inaction, and Gonzalo will tell you more about it, the state has created and it has sustained this climate of fear. And the impact of this goes much beyond the infringement of individual legal professional rights. Think the wider effect is systemic. Think of what happens in a system when a lawyer refuses, is hesitant to take on certain cases because there might be retaliation. A judge recuses himself from certain proceedings for the same reason. Prosecutors are pressured to serve political interests rather than the law. What you get is really access to justice for ordinary people disappearing, communities left without a defense or access to the courts, and essentially the public loses faith in the system. The justice system no longer works, and what we're talking about here is really a crisis of trust that has shaken the whole Philippine country. And I'll stop here and pass it on to Gonzalo.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonora. Well, concerning our next finding, we can say that the Philippine state bears responsibility for the physical attacks and extrajudicial killings of legal professionals, whether through direct involvement or acquiescence. Credible evidence was gathered all along our report that the Philippine state violated its obligation to protect and respect the right of life of legal professionals. Let's start from the finding that red tagging has emerged as a clear warning sign, maybe a predictor of a physical attack or unlawful killings. In some cases, we documented a direct link between red tagging campaigns and state agencies. In all cases, law enforcement, local and national authorities, and the courts failed to act. Despite knowing this risk associated with red tagging, no protection was offered. No preventive steps were taken. This failure created an environment where violence was not only possible but very much foreseeable. It enabled it, and it silently and explicitly permitted it. It sent a message. If you are a legal professional and you work in politically compromised cases, you better watch your back because you are on your own. This failure to protect is not by chance. The documented links between state agencies and red tagging campaigns, the common profile of legal professionals, as Eleonora said, the lawfare initiated by the state agencies, the same modus operandi adopted in all targeted killings, and the government unwillingness to issue protective measures, all these elements taken together strongly suggest that the state was responsible. Because when the state does nothing in the face of credible threats, when it turns a blind eye to foreseeable violence, that's not even neutrality, that's a complicity. Our last finding is that structural flaws in the investigation system are systematically exploited by the authorities to foster a climate of impunity. We have been observing a consistent pattern of incomplete and inadequate investigations into the killing of legal professionals, reflecting a culture of institutional acquiescence. With one exception, only one exception, none of the cases that we examined have proceeded to a trial, as they were all prematurely declared cold cases. This recurring failure constitutes a blatant and sustained breach of the Philippines' obligation to investigate violations of the right of life. And of course, it has consequences. It sends a signal to perpetrators that they won't be held to account. It feeds a pervasive culture of impunity, which in turn has served as a push factor for further violations. This investigative system is riddled with flaws. Let us highlight just a few. First of all, there's no independent specialized prosecutor office to handle cases that might involve state actors as perpetrators. Second, families, journalists, and even constitutional bodies like the Commission on Human Rights are denied access to essentially all the information concerning ongoing cases or fight investigations. This is done through the Executive Order number 2 of 2016. Witness protection in the Philippines is insufficient, leading to a near total absence of eyewitness testimony, even though most attacks happened in public in broad daylight. And forensic processes are shockingly inadequate. Crime scenes are contaminated. Scientific methods, as ballistic, are neglected. CCTV camera recordings are rarely accessed, and autopsies, when they happen at all, are often incomplete, privately funded, or even fabricated. There is a critical shortage of forensic experts, with only 2 trained forensic pathologists in the entire country, and no domestic training opportunities. These failures are an affront to the right of the families of victims to an effective remedy, but also embolden those who commit abuses. Because when justice is consistently denied, impunity takes roots and it spreads. Well, to have a hopeful ending of all of that, we would like to highlight that against this backdrop of fear and impunity, the Caravana also uncovered something powerful: a resilient, engaged, and courageous civil society. Across the country, we met Filipino legal professionals who, despite the risk and their low numbers, remain unwavering in their commitment to upholding the rule of law and defending human rights. Padayon, let's keep going, is not by chance the motto in the Visayan dialect of public interest lawyers from that region. It embodies the spirit of this segment of the legal profession all across the country. And now we're going with the recommendations.
Thank you, Eleonora Gonzalo, for that clear presentation. It really draws a picture of the situation of the legal professionals in the Philippines. We now turn to the key recommendations of the report. For this, it is my honor to introduce Herman Viervik, who is active in various human rights organizations in the Netherlands and participated in previous fact-finding missions to the Philippines that resulted in the report Human Rights Lawyers in the Philippines, an Endangered Species, 30 years ago. So now Herman will walk us through the Caravana recommendations. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalia. Good afternoon. The recommendations in our report, of course, you can find in our report. The ones present in this room, they found an excerpt of the report, which is the executive summary and the recommendations. The full report will be made available after this session via internet, together with the documentary footage, where we will come to discuss a little bit later. The recommendations basically are focused on two things. One is the accountability to stop impunity, and the second topic is to rebuild the trust in the legal system and in the legal institutions in the Philippines. Our recommendations are addressed both to the Philippine government and to the international community. Let me first pick some of the recommendations to highlight in this session. And those are the recommendations focused on accountability. It is our recommendation to the Philippine government that it should establish an independent and impartial body to investigate thoroughly and effectively all the extrajudicial killings, threats, and other forms of human rights violations against the Philippines lawyers in the past years. This body, in our view, should be free from control or influence from the administration. It must have sufficient resources, material and human resources, and it must have all the necessary investigative powers in order to investigate crimes, also crimes that may have been committed by official persons, irrespective of their rank or status. Furthermore, we recommend that the Philippine government will review all existing accountability bodies and dismantle these if they have no real purpose, and give those powers to that independent body I was referring to before. It is our recommendation to the Philippines government that it should develop policies for reparations of victims of human rights violations. The Philippine government should cooperate fully with the International Criminal Court in the context of the ongoing procedure against the former President Rodrigo Duterte for crimes against humanity. And it should ratify again Rome Statute to the ICC. Furthermore, we recommend that the Philippine government should strengthen its cooperation with the UN bodies, the UN human rights mechanisms, in a better way than is done today. But this is focusing on impunity. What is very relevant, according to us, is to empower civil society and rebuilding trust in the law system and its institutions. And for that, we have a separate group of recommendations addressed to the Philippine government. We believe that the Philippine government should strengthen the judicial independence, and in our report, we have more specific recommendations to that end. We believe that the Philippine government should strengthen the protection of lawyers and should, for instance, ratify the very brand new March 2025 Convention for the Protection of Professional Lawyers. This is a Council of Europe convention, but it's open for accession for other states in the world. We believe that the Philippine government should investigate and dismantle the National Task Force to End Local Terrorist Armed Conflict, as this body, its agents and proxies, are reported to be involved in the planning and perpetrating of red tagging we've just discussed. We believe that for this red tagging, the Philippine government should swiftly adopt legislation to define it and to criminalize it. There is a first step in that direction, but that should be done swiftly. And in that context, the word lawfare was made. We believe that the Philippine government should end the misuse and instrumentalization of the counter-terrorist acts that give many power to various arms of the government, and that this should be reviewed and should be amended in the way it's now. We furthermore believe that the Philippine government should reform laws and policies to ensure more power for the Philippine Commission on Human Rights, and also to meet the standards outlined in documents like the Minnesota Protocol. The Minnesota Protocol is a UN instrument which is aimed to ensure that the criminal investigation is done in a proper way. And we have seen evidence that this is not done in various cases. Now I come to speak on the recommendations of our delegation, the Caravana Filipina, addressed to the international community. We believe that the international community, all states, should take all diplomatic and legal tools to put pressure on the government of the Philippines to conduct an independent investigation into the extrajudicial killings and other human rights violations against lawyers in the Philippines in the past years, and also to implement the other recommendations that we have put forward in our report. Human rights must be non-negotiable. It should be a non-negotiable red line in all bilateral and multilateral treaties. And we recommend for that reason that every trade deal, financial agreement, mutual legal assistance treaty, or any other form of state support shall be made conditional on clear, measurable commitments to deliver justice and accountability. And at the same time, and that's the last recommendation I'm going to share with you now, addressed to the international community, is that the international community is recommended to provide increased material and technical assistance to the civil society organizations that have shown to be so important in the country. They are tirelessly promoting the access to justice for victims. With the trial of the former President Duterte now underway at the ICC, we have a vital opportunity to serve justice for the victims. States should build on this momentum by actively engaging with the government of the Philippines to strengthen the accountability mechanisms, not only internationally, but also on a domestic level. The time for statements of concern is now long past. What is needed is sustained, coordinated action. Thank you.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you, Herman, for that overview, which is a roadmap not only for the state, but also for international bodies, for the civil society and bar associations. To offer a national perspective and live insights, we now invite to the floor a lawyer from the Philippines who is joining us online, who has worked closely with affected communities and colleagues. We are honored to be joined by Maria Cristina Conti, a prominent human rights lawyer, Secretary General of the National Union of People's Lawyers, and Treasurer of the Confederation of Lawyers of Asia and the Pacific. She's also counsel for victims in the ICC investigation. For her work, Christina has become a target, facing red tagging, malicious online attacks, and anonymous threats to both herself and her family. Her experience reflects the broader pattern of harassment and intimidation documented in the report, a pattern that continues to this day. Christina, thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing about your work with the ICC and how it has affected your professional and personal life and what it reveals about the landscape in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. All right. Good afternoon to all of you, and magandang araw. I'm a people's lawyer in the Philippines, handling cases of victims of the systemic crisis here in our society. This translates to decades of repression and massive violations of not only civil and political rights, but also economic and social rights. There are less than 500 lawyers like me who work in the so called alternative path. We work in communities and with grassroots organizations to ensure long term and effective change. And so we deal not only with issues of justice and of the law, but also of access to justice and of equity. We are not only legal advisors, we're also community organizers, community elders, confidants, educators, advocates, defenders for all these victims. We don't just offer them free legal aid. We stand in the line of fire for our clients, serving not only the marginalized, and most especially, we serve those who are dehumanized, those who are vilified, those who are called enemies of the state. And certainly, there is no government support for this kind of lawyering. The National Union of People's Lawyers was one of the first groups to speak against Rodrigo Duterte's drug policy, the war on drugs, or from what we've known from experience, not a war, but a massacre, and not against drugs, but against the poor. And they were the perfect victims: poor, ill informed, less educated. They had no connections. They lived in communities tainted with the drug trade or drug use. They were victims who were very willing to blame themselves. In 2016, the National Capital Region chapter of NUPL signed a cooperation agreement with a church based group supporting victims. They call themselves Rise Up for Life and for Rights. And now I must note, they have also become a group of victims supporting fellow victims. When we got together, it was dangerous times. In the first 6 months of Duterte's term, 1,000 persons died every month. 2,000 killed by police, 3,000 killed by unknown perpetrators. By 2017, we looked at some of these cases and we were able to build 6 cases against police officers. To gather evidence, we visited communities, set up legal clinics, what we call them legal service in communities. We spoke to and trained the media on the law and police protocols. But it became plenty clear that victims and witnesses of these atrocities were afraid to share what they knew, if any. We have to note too that the killings were oftentimes committed as if with the assurance that there will be no investigation, no prosecution. We went to wakes and funerals. We collected pictures of crime scenes and bodies. In one of those visits, I looked at the body of a man with a bullet wound to the head. His death certificate stated that he died of pneumonia. For the family, they let it go because it was convenient, less controversial, and it took the heat off them. In 2018, we knew that because the killings were part of a larger systematic attack, we had to go after the most responsible. And so we submitted communications to the International Criminal Court through the Office of the Prosecutor. We were one of, and until now, the most vocal victims group, which has openly admitted participating in the process. I myself registered with the court as assistant to counsel in anticipation of trial on this case, clinging to what we thought then was very slim hope for truth and accountability. Being part of the ICC is invaluable to the Philippines. Yeah, the Philippines participated in the UN Diplomatic Conference where the Rome Statute was finalized. We were part of the drafting committee. We approved it along with 120 countries. We had just come from the era of Marcos and martial law, where we experienced a massive attack on human rights. There were no transitional justice mechanisms in place, no significant criminal prosecution. Civil claims were more successful abroad, and later on there was this disinformation campaign. And so, the son of the dictator is now president. When Duterte was arrested on March 11th this year, it felt like, tectonic plates colliding. It changed the landscape permanently, hopefully. It showed us that the rich and the powerful could be arrested and detained on these kinds of violations. That has not happened in the Philippines. But in turn, unfortunately, we've had the victims vilified and attacked. The victims, they turned around the narrative and called them drug addicts. Some started to attack others, saying that they were fake or pretending to be victims. Others said that the victims were just being used as political pawns in the issue between the Marcoses and the Dutertes. As their lawyers, as their advocates, we were also vilified and attacked. Myself, as a woman, first belittled for looks, as always in any society. I was discredited as a lawyer, called a liar, called stupid. I was red tagged and terrorist tagged as if to raise a doubt as to my allegiances. I was called a destabilizer of government. And these public statements are intended to destroy my reputation. But there were also direct messages, there were also phone calls that were just directed to me. And these are intended to destroy my spirit. And for us, we believe that these are threats not only to the profession, but also to the administration for justice. When they attack you for what I stand for, then I know that I'm on the right track. And so I call on all of you. Thank you so much for your solidarity with the victims and the lawyers. And we hope you could help us reject the wrong notions to correct the narrative in this ongoing disinformation campaign battle. We are happy that we are all part of the international discourse and that you have given us spaces wherever possible. And thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Thank you especially for joining us and contributing to this discussion when it's so late in the Philippines. Also, thank you for everyone joining online from the Philippines. So your testimony really underlines not only the risk, but also the essential resilience of the legal professionals in the Philippines. With that, we conclude the first part of our program. We have heard about the facts, the legal framework, and the lived experience behind the report. We now shift to a more personal experiential focus, one that connects human stories to the systemic patterns we have described here. So for that, we will watch a 3-minute preview of the documentary we will show later after the Q&A session. And later, my colleagues will also introduce the documentary and his producer.
In June 2016, the Philippines was rocked by a political earthquake. Rodrigo Duterte, an outsider, a strongman, was swept into power by a wave of discontent and hope. But for many, the excitement quickly turned into a nightmare. Duterte's war on drugs unleashed a torrent of bloodshed. From Duterte's own office, a brutal system was born, modeled after his reign in Davao.
It happened in Mindoro. A crime watch leader, it's a non-government organization, was killed by two gunmen riding in tandem a motorcycle. And so the murder was reported immediately. And so the police of the next town were alerted that those gunmen are going towards your direction. So they set up a checkpoint. They were able to apprehend the two gunmen. And when they removed the balaclavas of those two persons, they found out the two were active police officers. So that's not just anecdotal evidence now, that the killers, the top-hung killers, are actually active police officers.
A former police colonel would later testify before the Human Rights Committee. Police officers were rewarded per body, a bounty for every life taken.
The orders may be questionable. Definitely questionable. Pero if you're a policeman, are you in the position to question the order of the commander-in-chief? They're under duress. Kasi may mga times before na pag hindi ka sumunod, di ikaw ililista. Ikaw ilalagay sa listahan at ikaw ang sasabihin ng protector. At ikaw rin papatayin. Huwag nila sabihin nila yung, huwag nila sabihin na hindi.
Thousands were killed, and it wasn't just the drug users.
One of these days, kayong human rights, kayo ang investigahin ko. Totoo. Conspiracy. If they are obstructing justice, you shoot them.
Between 2016 and 2022, 59 legal workers have been killed in the Philippines. None of those cases brought to justice.
I want to focus on those 70 lawyers killed during the Duterte administration. It never happened before.
Most of them had dedicated their lives to defending the voiceless, indigenous communities, farmers, workers, and the marginalized. An international delegation of 12 legal experts traveled to the Philippines. Their mission: uncover the truth behind the killings of their fellow human rights defenders. They met with indigenous peoples protecting ancestral lands, farmers facing violent land grabbing, religious minorities, and workers resisting displacement, repression, and discrimination.
Thank you. For the next part of this session, I would like to give the floor to Hans Heisbeck. Hans is founder of the Day of Endangered Lawyer and also part of the Caravana delegation. Hans, over to you.
Thank you. To start with something less serious, I would like to say that it is important that all of you who want to stay after the meeting for having a drink, you're very, very welcome. And then I now start to introduce firstly Clarissa. First Jaco, yes. Good. Because Jaco, making of this document. So, yes, Jaco is, I remember very well, he was, we were already thinking a lot about trying to do something for the Philippine colleagues and to arrange a kind of mission, and then we thought we need a documentary. We really need a documentary. And Jaco, everything came to the direction that you should have Jaco for that. Jaco, the man with the hat, always with the hat. And well, and I was in my car and we spoke. We had a good, very nice conversation, and he said directly, yes, I'm in for this. I want to support your mission with all the international lawyer organizations, and I want to be part of the mission by making a documentary, because it's very important to have all what you see there, all what you hear there, all what happens there. It's very hard to show it here. It's kind of a very difficult translation. Things that happened in the Philippines for years, to get them here on the table, on the agenda. So, but if you really need a good documentary maker who's also giving his heart and all his passion to the subject of the Philippine people, then you always come to Jaco Groen, and he's somebody who has also made a very important documentary about child abuse, child prostitution in the Philippines, which is also a really shocking and very important film to change the world. But he has also made that's how I came to know him. a documentary about a Dutch priest who was killed in 2012. And this Dutch priest, Willem Geertman, I also know his brother. His brother is also watching, I think. He has been working as a priest for 40 years in the Philippines, and there were professions called in which people have been killed, but also priests have been killed in this very Catholic country. This is crazy. But so hard is the struggle there for humanity. Geertman gave 40 years of his life to work with the farmers, the indigenous peoples, and defenders of the environment, and so he had to be killed. Why? Because of big things behind the screens. The documentary is named War on Minerals. It's also a very important work of Jaco. So we don't have the least documentary maker here, and he's also being supported by his wife, who's come from the Philippines, Eunice de Assis. She's here as well, and she's the woman behind the men, and working hard, very hard for women's rights here in the Netherlands. So. Jaco has right to have a good introduction, so I hope I did something